Alright, this is hopefully a quick class today, and this is along the lines of how to get the bottom seat cut or the bevel on the sleeper. And you don't got to use this specifically for the sleeper, but this is a method that I created of how to get an angle for some of these roofing members. They're kind of tricky. So we all know how to do the hip, where you have the hip coming down. Say that's the hip plumb cut right there. And for 1.5" stock, you would do 1/2 the thickness of the stock, and so we all know that you would go 3/4 on either side for a 45-degree, and then of course you run your saw down down this way and then go back the opposite way. Well, you can also apply that method to a lot of these roofing angles, and the way you would do it is, say, using the sleeper for an example. If I lay the sleeper down on the roof, the adjoining roof, the roof that it's laying on top of, say it was a 6/12 pitch. So I know that I can Google whatever the degrees on the saw and just cut it. But if I was going to lay this on top of the wall plate, it would be the opposite angle. So it would, instead of being like the plumb cut of a 7/12, it would turn into the seat cut. So the easiest way I can really explain to make it simple is you need to establish what the angle would be. If I'm looking down at the board like this, right, and it's on the rake, so it's angled, and normally I would take, my plumb cut would be like here on the side, going down, and then it would be, I would have, that would be the plumb cut where it starts, then I'd have 3/4 and 3/4 on this side, and that would give me my 45-degree lines, which these lines wouldn't exactly be 45 degrees. We already know that part. But what I'm trying to get is what would be the ratio between this line here as your, let me try to draw it in 3 dimensions. So this line, and then going this way, plumb, what would be my angle if this would be, this is to 6 as 12 is to what? So let me get that out of your head now. So now I have 1.5 there, and here's my plumb cut. So if I go 90 degrees to that, to this, it would be, here would be what would be my 12, or my seat cut. What would correspond? I don't know if that's the right word, but what would correspond to that? So how would I do that is I would change, basically this 1.5 would become like a rise. So if I put 1.5 here, do this math real fast for me, please. So the way I do it, I take the lonely friend, and he goes to the people that are together, the other 2 friends, and so I divide 12 into 6. Okay, and now I multiply by 1.5. 3. Okay, so basically when I get my plumb cut, I'm going to measure where does 3 die into this rake of the hip right here, and that's going to be, if I were to square across the 1.5, I'm going to connect those on top. So you try putting that on a saw. Can make sure everybody can see that good right there. You try putting that line right there on a saw. I don't really think you're going to get, maybe if you had a swing table, it might do it. But really what most people do is they just cut this off square and then run the saw down, you know, eye it down both lines. It's best cut as much as you can and then come back with a sawzall. So there's the angle right there. So your saw, well, you know, I'm making an angle on this side, you know, just, but really what it would be is you would have another plumb cut, you know, and then so your saw would ride this plumb cut as well as this angle cut right there, and that would give you your compound cut. So, you know, wherever it is, you know, if you know you got to go to the long point of the board in order to get, you know, if this is my long point, short of the long of the bevel is short of the pitch, I guess, you know, but you have to, I mean, you determine that where you're actually going to measure your points from. I would calculate this mathematically, so I would already have probably, it's hard to picture right here because I didn't set this up like it's an actual sleeper. But let's see, on your sleeper, so if I laid a sleeper down, here's the top cut of the sleeper, and then I have like this would be like my pitch cut, and then the bevel would be like, you really can't see it, but it would go like straight back along with the plates. So you would have to keep the saw on this line plus on, you kind of see it whenever you get there. But either way, you don't really have an angle that you're going to be able to set the saw on. But you can also hand cut these. Honestly, you know, you take I mean, maybe one more minute to cut this with a handsaw than you would with a circular saw, honestly. I really like these cuts though, and the practical element of this is there's no guesswork. You hook it with your, you know, the bird's mouth hooks the outside of the plates. You pull those tight, and then the top's going to come together, and there's no math. As long as you've done that math correctly and the roof is not real messed up, everything should be level and everything should plane. So, but don't take my word for it.